Okay, we are in a message series right now called Shadows of the Soul, and we're talking about the effects that have happened to us now, that all of us are experiencing by no longer living in the Garden of Eden. You know, God's original design for us, His original plan for us was perfection. And we had healthy bodies that would never wear out, and we had healthy relationships, and we had purpose, we had identity, we had meaning, and we were in a safe and secure world. And of course, you know, it isn't long. I mean, we're just a couple of chapters into the Bible, and the serpent deceives Adam and Eve, and they fall from this state, and they are banished from the Garden of Eden. And now we have a lot of problems because of this. We live in a world where everything's broken, where our bodies wear out, where relationships disintegrate and deteriorate, where everything that we make, eventually, Jesus says, moths and rust destroy, or thieves break in and steal. Even the ground is cursed against us. And it's a scary world, a frightening world that we live in, a world where, you know, it's kill or be killed, eat or be eaten, and there are many oppressed and many abused and many victimized. It's also a world where we question our identity, we question our worth. You know, when we walk with God in the garden, we have this sense of being His children and being in relationship with Him, but now being banished from the garden, we ask these deep fundamental questions. Who am I, and where did I come from, and what's my purpose, and do I really matter, and how do I know that I matter, and where does my sense of worth come from? And there's a lot of ways that people will sort of build up their own worth and identity by maybe accomplishing a lot, achieving a lot, striving hard, being very driven, being very focused, and you get a sense of your value by all that you've accomplished. And that, can some days make us feel better about ourselves, but often creates envy between us and others. And so today we want to focus on one of the dominant sins, one of the dominant problems. We talked about anger. Last week we talked about pride. And today we're going to talk about deceit or lying. One of the commandments, commandment number 9, is not to bear false witness against your neighbor, or more simply stated, don't lie. That lying is not usually done in order to better someone else's life. Typically when people lie, it's because they're trying to avoid whatever the truth would bring them. They're trying to keep themselves safe or protect themselves, or to try to protect, their standing in some way. And so all of us at times can be prone to deceit or prone to lying, and we need to catch that and decide that we should choose a path of integrity, and, as Jesus said, speak truthfully to one another. In fact, He said the truth will set you free, and the lie is what often, holds us back or continues us down a very negative path. By the way, I learned a very important lesson, stupid preacher jokes. Never lie to a dentist, because the tooth will always come out in the end. Never lie to a radiologist, because they'll see right through you. A man decided to buy a new robot. This robot was trained to be able to tell if somebody was lying or telling the truth. And if they were telling a lie, the robot would smack them in the face. So the man brought the robot home, introduced it to his family, and then he set his son up and asked him, he said, "Son, what'd you do today when you came home from school?" To which his son replied, "Oh, nothing, Dad. I just watched a movie." And he's like, "Oh, really? Well, what movie was it?" Star Wars." Well, the robot reached over and slapped him in the face, and he's like, "So you want to try that again? What movie did you watch?" And he's like, "Texas Chainsaw Massacre." And the robot didn't slap him, so the dad said, I would never watch a movie like that." Well, the robot then slapped the dad in the face. And the mom, his wife, said, "You sure can tell he's just like you." Like, you can tell he's... Then the robot just smacked her in the face, He, like father, like son. So, all of us from time to time might be tempted to stretch the truth or embellish the truth to make ourselves look better or to cover some part of our story that, maybe is humiliating or we're not proud of. When I think about deception in the Bible, I can't help but think of the serpent, in the Garden of Eden. But then there's other characters that come to mind, like Ananias and Sapphira, when they lie about how much money they're giving to the Lord, and it ends up a big problem. But probably the character that comes to my mind the most prominent in this problem is Jacob. Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, which means wrestles with God or wrestles against God, because the nation of Israel, throughout their Old Testament experience, is going to be a nation that seems to at times for God and then at times turns away from Him and is constantly striving with and against God. And Jacob, is by and large a deceiver in the Bible. The blessing will go from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, and he will be considered one of the patriarchs of the faith. But Jacob was prone to scheming at times. And, you could say maybe it came from his mom's side of the family, because in some ways, Rebecca, his mother, the way she arranged things, Jacob followed in that path. So let's look at chapter 27 of the book of Genesis, and I want us to learn a couple of lessons about this story. Let me just summarize it real quick before we get into the details. Isaac is on his deathbed. Isaac is aged and he's blind now because of his years, and he has to pass the blessing down in his family. Now this may not be so important to us in our culture. I mean, everybody wants to be blessed by their parents. Everybody wants to know your parents love you and they care about you. And, it'd be great if there was some kind of inheritance to pass down to you that you could then share with your kids. But in our culture, we tend to try to have equity, and we tend to try to divide things equally. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes there are favorites, and there's maybe reasons why one person in the family is entrusted with more than another, but we tend to try toward equity in our culture. But in their culture, the oldest son would receive 2/3 of the inheritance, and the blessing would typically transfer through the family. In other words, the line of the family descent is going to usually pass to the oldest son. Well, in this case, Esau is the older brother. But we've been introduced to Esau in the past. The younger brother Jacob outsmarted his older brother and stole from him his birthright. And that's part of what's happening here. And then when you have the birthright, in other words, you're the first son in the family or the position of prominence, typically then that is sealed and secured with the giving of the father's blessing, and usually that was withheld till almost the point of death. In case there was some kind of change in the family dynamic, the father could retain that blessing until the last moment. And so Jacob has swindled the birthright from his brother, and now in this account, he's going to scheme to take the blessing, the final gift, to secure his prominent position in the family. But what does this do between him and his brother Esau? It's going to create major problems that you could say are still into effect today with these cultures in the Middle East. And the origin of that conflict could be found right here in this chapter. Okay, look at chapter 27. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son, here am I," he answered. Isaac said, "I'm now an old man and don't know the day of my death. But now then, go get your equipment, your quiver, your bow, and go out to the open country and hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die." So Esau, the macho brother, Jacob, mama's little helper in the kitchen. Esau is the favored son, it would appear, from Isaac, and he tells him to go out, and hunt. And we know that the Bible describes Esau as a red and hairy guy. It's kind of an interesting description. But he's an outdoorsman. And, he's a man's man. And Isaac, respects that and loves that about his son. Tells him to go out and hunt and then kill something roast it, bring it back, give me that to eat, and I will transfer the blessing, I will transfer the inheritance, I'll transfer the lineage of the prominence of our family to you as my son. Now, God had already told the family that that was going to transfer to Jacob. And for whatever reason, Isaac is ignoring that and thinks he knows better and decides that, no, it's not going to go to Jacob, it's going to go to Esau. And somehow, Jacob is just supposed to believe that God is going to work things out and he will be who the family line is known for. And Rebekah, his mother, overhears Isaac talking to Esau. And listen to what happens, verse 5. Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, look, I have overheard that your father, what he has said to Esau, bring me some game, prepare me some tasty food, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring back 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you the blessing before he dies. So you get what's happening here is, while Esau is out hunting, he's being betrayed by his own family. And Rebekah starts to concoct a plan. We could deceive your father, Isaac, and make sure that the transfer of blessing comes to Jacob. Go out and get a couple of goats, livestock, and I will prepare them in such a way that it tastes like wild game. It tastes like what he enjoys. And Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, but my brother Esau is a hairy man. What a great verse in the Bible. And I have smooth skin. Notice Jacob doesn't balk at the idea of this plan. What scares him is getting caught. And so he's complicit in this plan. And he's not worried about, is this really the way we should do this? Should we really scheme and trick and deceive? Sometimes families have these kinds of deceptions in your past. And maybe you never even know about it until someone passes away, and then your aunt, has that awkward conversation with you in the funeral home and tells you, that you got a sister in Toledo or something you didn't know about. And families sometimes have some interesting skeletons in the closet, and they will work really hard to cover those up and keep those secrets. And it starts sometimes in moments like this, where you think you're doing something that makes sense, you're doing something that you may even think you're following God's will, but God doesn't need your help by lying and deceiving in order to try to accomplish his will. And Jacob backs up at first and thinks, we can get caught, like this could be a problem. How am I supposed to fool my dad? He's certainly going to know the difference, and Esau is hairy and I'm smooth. And so he sees problems that could develop pragmatically and doesn't want to get caught. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him. You would be. You would appear that way because you are. I read a quote that said, it really stuck with me. It said, never try to meddle in someone's life with a lie when yours could be destroyed with the truth. Yeah. And, in moments like this, the truth becomes very fluid and very flexible in order to accomplish the goal. And we can play pretty fast and loose with the facts and the details sometimes in order to just get what we want, in order to accomplish the agenda. Like the goal is so valuable and so worth it that, it's a means to an end. The ends justify the means, we might say. So what if my father, I don't want to get caught. His mother said to him, my son, let the curse fall on me. In other words, I'll take the blame of something. If this doesn't work out, I'll take the blame. Just do what I say. And there's probably been many times in your life where you maybe went farther than you thought you would because somebody dominant and powerful in your life just said, do what I tell you to do. And you didn't want to think about it. You didn't want to you didn't want to go against that person that you love. Maybe you should have resisted, but for whatever reasons, you just went along with it, and you end up in over your head, farther than you wanted to go, down a road that you don't know how to come back from. Because sometimes the people that we love the most and that love us the most, we trust the most. And we don't expect that sometimes the people that we trust the most might not really be working for our good or for the good of the family or for the good of the kingdom. And sometimes it's easier just to put your head down and do what you're told than to fight back or to push back. And Jacob goes along with this plan and justifies it in his mind. It's always going to take some level of justification. So he went and got them, brought them to his mother, and she prepared the tasty food that her husband liked, and Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and she dressed up her son Jacob. Let's look at the difference between Esau and Jacob. I mean, Esau's out hunting, killing stuff, bringing it back, roasting it, throwing it on a fire. Jacob, mom's literally dressing him. And sometimes these divisions in families over mom's favorite, dad's favorite, can just wreak havoc in families. And so she's, there's always, in deception, there's always some pretending you're somebody that you're not. And he's putting on Esau's clothes, but he can't really be Esau. He's wearing a false presentation of himself. And this sin of deceit will do that to you. You'll be more concerned about how other people are responding to you than about whether you're being true or whether you have integrity. Because it's all about the presentation. It's all about how you're coming across. And so there's this constant image management of, are people thinking highly of me? Are people respecting me? Are people interested in me? How are people responding to me? Because, I am who they tell me I am. And so it's so important that I play to the crowd, that I win them over, that I impress them, that they think positively of me. And this can become a whole purpose for your life that can move you very far away from faithfulness to God and just to yourself. You can literally lose yourself in all the false identities that you create in order to impress or to persuade or to deceive and win the people around you. And Jacob is dressing up as someone he is not in order to gain something that God said he would give him anyway. It really makes you stop and think about, what are we doing? God already promised that he was going to take care of it. But notice, like Rebekah and Jacob, they feel responsible to make this happen in their time, because they don't see God working fast enough. They don't see God moving quick enough, and so they take matters into their own hands and try to manifest this or create this in their time. If the devil can't make you dirty, he'll just make you impatient. He'll just make you want it right now. And there's many things out there I think that God would give to us, but it's always going to be in his timing. And when we get nervous about that, we find ourselves maybe going after things that God has told us to wait. He'll work it out. It can be so hard sometimes to trust that God is really going to work it out. So what'd she do? She dressed him up in his brother's clothes. She covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. So I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but they took the hair or the fur or whatever of the goat and they made gloves, and I don't understand. I mean, they created some ruse. She knew her husband better than anybody, and she knew how to deceive and how to fool her husband. And so he took his big pot of goat stew, and he went in and sat before his father. And his father said, "Who is it?" He says, "It's your son. It's Esau, your firstborn." Now that's a lie. That's not truth. And this is where it'll take you. You'll pretend to be somebody you're not in order to get something that maybe God doesn't want you to have. or wants you to have in his own time. I'm Esau, your firstborn. I've done what you've told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing. Of course, Isaac is not a fool. He hears the voice and he says, this is the voice of my son Jacob, but when I touch you, you feel like my son Esau. And he says, oh yeah, I'm Esau. And when Isaac pulls him near and hugs him, he hugs him and smells him, and he smells like Esau, the animal skin, and maybe he sat next to that open fire and some of that smoke was absorbed into his clothes. And so when the father hugs his son, he's fooled. And it's such betrayal. It's so sometimes the people hugging you are lying to you. Sometimes the people that want to get closest to you so that you don't find out the truth. It's such a moment of deception. It's such a moment of betrayal. I mean, like Judas kissing Jesus on the face as he's betraying him. Jacob, one of the patriarchs of God's people, lying to his father about his identity. And of course, Isaac believes, because why would he think? Why would he think that I would be lied to like this? And that's how you end up caught in these traps, is because you have a pure heart. Because you have a pure heart and you have a pure idealistic concept of how people are going to treat you and how they're going to behave, you fall for the lie because you can't imagine that anybody would actually do this. And there's a part of you when you figure this out that just wants to hit your head and say, I should have known. How come I didn't know? How come I couldn't see? In the moment, I believed the lie. I believed that she really loved me, or I believed that he really wanted the best for me, or I believed that they would support me. And then when the truth comes out, you're shocked and horrified because you expect this kind of behavior from them outside, but you don't expect to be lied to and deceived by the people that are closest to you. It takes a lot of work to maintain a lie like this. You will lie and then you'll lie again to cover that lie. And before you know it, I don't even know if you know the truth, because everything you say is based on this lie. And that's why Jesus says the truth will set you free, because you end up overwhelmed by all of the lies. By the way, lies will often be found out by those who do a great job of listening and remembering. Those of you that know how to listen well and can remember things can often detect lies. But it's so much better to just let's stop lying. Nine times out of 10, the lie is going to get you into more trouble than the truth would have. If you would have just told the truth when you were asked, yeah, you might have gotten in trouble, but now that you're lying to us, how are we ever supposed to believe anything you say? To just break the vase and then come and say, Mom, Dad, I broke the vase. Yeah, you might get punished for that. You might get the disappointing look. But when you glue it together and put it in your brother's room and hide it in his drawer and blame it on him, you just multiply. It's the cover-up that often gets you. It's the cover-up that often gets you found out and makes it worse. And the sad thing is we live in a country where you can't even imagine politicians being honest with you. Because it's so much a normal part of our life that we just expect. When somebody calls you and they want to talk to you about your gutters, you just know this person's probably going to lie to me. When you sign up for, probably the greatest lie that you and I participate in is, I have read and agreed to the terms of service. And we click that. And then we wonder why we get this bill that we didn't sign up for, because we're constantly being lied to. And at some point you don't even know who to believe anymore. You don't even know how to trust anymore. You go look up, are eggs something that are good for me to eat? You find 5 resources that say, yes, they're good for you. And then you find 5 other resources that say, no, they'll kill you, give you cancer. Is coffee, sugar, flour, milk. You see, I mean, it's like we live in this culture where, I don't know, I hear one story on this side and one story on that side. And they've got evidence and they've got evidence. And man, you feel like Isaac being hugged by a hairy son that's not even, I don't even know who to believe anymore. And then you go to church and you have to decide, well, which church do I go to? Catholic, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, Pentecostal, Holiness, PCUSA, PCA, Evangelical Lutheran. I mean, it's like, could somebody just tell us the truth? Could somebody just look us in the eyes and regardless of how much we don't want to hear it, regardless of how much it may pain us, can somebody just be honest with us and tell us the truth for a minute so that I can deal with reality as it is, not as the reality as is constructed in your mind? Jesus says the truth will set you free. And the truth is all of us at times can be like Jacob, covering ourselves with our little stories, pretending we're somebody we're not. Maybe we're afraid that if we were who we were, that people would reject us. Or if we were just who we were, that maybe they wouldn't like us because of our smooth skin. So we lie to ourselves and lie to each other and lie to God. And you know, this was a devastating moment in this family. Jacob won. Clearly he won. He was willing to do what Esau was not willing to do, and he won. And he got the blessing. And at the end of the day, ha ha ha, I won the contest, I got the blessing, I got the birthright. None of this was necessary. God was going to work this out in his own way, but they didn't wait for God. They jumped ahead, took matters into their own hands, and Jacob won. Esau lost. And from that moment on, there was a rift that could never really be mended. Esau was so angry, as anybody would. Esau was so angry. He was so hurt, so devastated, that he said, as soon as my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother. Now that might have been a little extreme, and he didn't actually do it. But he thought about it. Jacob ended up running away, hiding, because that's what liars do. They might be right out there in public. They might be your mayor. They might be your governor. They might be your pastor. They might be your dad. And they might present themselves right out there in public with the position of prominence, but inside they're hiding. And they will the rest of their life. Because everything is built on a lie. And Jacob goes into hiding, and he ends up working for his uncle Laban. And remember, you know what Laban does to him? He does the same thing to Jacob did to his dad. He deceives him. And he tells him, yeah, you can have my daughter Rachel. But he doesn't end up with Rachel because there was deception. Because what comes around goes around. And often when you build your life on deception, don't be surprised if you yourself fall for the deception. And the greatest deception is that all your worth and value is based on what you've accomplished, based on what you've achieved, based on your resume, based on your success. Look, God loves you when you're a failure. When you're a big failure, He still loves you. And He knows you for who you really are. And decides to want a relationship with you. Not because you impress Him, but because you break His heart. Not because of your successes, but because of your emptiness. He's drawn to you as a father is drawn to a child. And He loves you not because of how much you've done, how much you've accomplished, or how much you can do. He loves you simply because He created you. You have His identity in you, His DNA in you. So go out and do great things. Just don't lie about it. Go out and change the world. Make a difference for the kingdom. But walk with the Lord in His timing. Release that fear that I could never be enough unless I accomplish, unless I achieve, unless I win. And accept the fact that even though I am what I am, God in His grace and mercy loves me, has broken through eternity for me. God, we thank you, Lord, for your grace and goodness. Thank you for bringing us here today. Help us, God, when we get everything backwards and we start evaluating ourselves based on our financial state, on our job, our education level. And we might impress others, but God, we are hopeless. And we just pray that today that you would help us to know that you love us even when we have failed and failed miserably. Help us to quit hiding and pretending that we're somebody we're not. To just accept that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that you've created us for a purpose. You love us in spite of our failures and flaws. Help us to choose a life of integrity, to make the decision to take the long, high road, even when it's difficult, and even when others pass us and pass by us. Lord, help us to just faithfully continue on day after day, knowing you and making you known in this world. At this time in our service, if you're ready to commit yourself to the Lord, we'd love to talk with you and pray with you and help you in that decision. You can stay after the service. I'll be down front here, or you can stop at our prayer table on the way out. You can text the word decision to us. If you don't get our weekly text, please make sure at the welcome table today you give us your phone number. I send out an email every week. If you don't get that email, give us your email address so we can stay in touch with you. You know, church is a conversation. It's a conversation we're having together and with the Lord. And that doesn't have to just be on Sunday mornings. But if you're ready today to know Him as your Lord and Savior, we want to help you in that decision. Let's stand together. Let's sing this song together.